This is the Convergence.
Hi everyone, I'm here this week in Maui, Hawaii, just spending some time with the family and exploring all the amazing things we have here on this planet. Just being hopeful that the work that we do here on the show, Web 3.0, and the work that Evergreen does actually pays off in spades in the end and can help us preserve this amazing planet. Hey, this week we're going to do part 2 of my interview with Nick Juntilla from Ownerfy, and that's going to start right now.
I think NFTs have fueled like an explosion of art like we've never seen in the last like 2 decades. It's insane the motivation that it's created in this, and especially young artists to make art that we would have never seen if it wasn't for NFTs.
That's very true.
So I'm blown away, like just going on like Instagram and like following like these Instagram NFT pages and seeing all these crazy like 3D things with things shooting out of people's eyes and mouth. And this is stuff like 3D artists before, especially so you're talking about like photo artists. Maybe this isn't the best medium for a lot of them, even though I know some that aren't doing very well. But like for some people, like 3D studio artists who make like CG graphics for like studios, they've never had a way to share their art.
Never. I helped start a company called Hypatia that launched a metaverse in 2015, and we had a lot of 3D animators and folks that used Unity and all these kind of systems, and they were true artists.
Oh yeah,
but they didn't go to First Friday. We were in Old Town Scottsdale on First Friday where all the artists set up on there. They left because they couldn't. 3D printing is what changed it for them, because they could start to print what they were doing and trying to sell those. But it was still, talk about real starving artists. 3D artists are usually.
I know it's absolutely like they can now hang their art on the living room wall. I mean,
that's pretty insane, and people can trade it, and it also I think falls into a lot of the folks that I work with. We had a thing. I think it was every Saturday afternoon they would do D&D at the office, right? They'd all bring in the old Dungeons and Dragons. It's just that sort of those, they like that sort of tangible things that they can touch. They like to display that type of artwork. They want that sort of those 3D printed action figure kind of models, and they just didn't have an opportunity to do that before. But now they can do it, and on top of that, I'm one of our guests coming up in a couple of weeks here is selling some pretty amazing Jordan prototypes that are for the metaverse. They're NFTs that you can use in the metaverse, and I'm like, that just is the next step, right? Now you're buying an NFT of a prototype shoe that was authorized, that has a certificate of authenticity that you can then put on your character and go play in a game.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It's phenomenal. I mean, so right now what's going on with art, and I think is like sort of phase 1 of NFTs.
I do too.
And I think next year, and I think this is all still going to be here next year, but I think at next year, we're going to start seeing a lot more of the practical NFTs coming into the world, like these big companies releasing NFTs for membership rewards and the handbag companies and the fashion companies releasing NFTs for their things. And that's more like the kind of business that I've been, working with, and that's where I want to live, is in that business, because I think that what's really exciting about physically connected NFTs is that they allow for you to remove the ownership from the possession of an item. So somebody can own something, they don't need to have it in their physical possession. And so when you do that, when you create this new paradigm in the world, you can trade products and assets, not just like big things like property, but like small things like jewelry. You can trade these things in an exchange, in a global exchange, with that piece of jewelry sitting someplace in a vault, or if it's a shoe, or if it's a collectible action figure or something like that.
Or think you could own a piece of the Mona Lisa. You'd never physically possess it, but you could have a proof of ownership. Let's say, because I know some folks that donate money to art institutions and museums and those kind of things. The people who usually donate have to donate huge sums of money because, that's what it takes to acquire those pieces. But you could crowdsource that ownership, and the possession belongs to the gallery, where the museum where it's going to be forever. But you could crowdsource the ownership, and people could participate in that in a real sort of tangible way, that they have they've got a documentation that they're part of that process, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah. So there's never been like a public sort of record, like the county clerk's office, for instance, tells you like who owns what house. But there isn't like a public record who tells you like who owns what television set, or who owns who owns a refrigerator, right? It's like, why, like our system of record keeping as a humanity, as a species, is just not there yet, but we are. And it's just an upgrade to our organization as a species.
I think your county clerk analogy there is probably the best analogy I've heard on ownership in blockchain, because it's very true. Like there are places that record these things. You go and get it notarized to make sure that your identity is true. I mean, it's essentially a very manual process, and there's still filing cabinets at the courthouses to look through those things, but you're virtualizing that. And I think I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, title companies are going to be really disrupted by this, because the work that they're doing right now is not necessary if you had a blockchain title for that house. Right.
Yeah. So and now it's on these digital railroad tracks, where you can do all sorts of really interesting. You could do DeFi stuff. You can lend against it, and you can use it as collateral. You can create futures markets on it. I mean, there's so many weird things. You can do sharing better. Like you could say, like, I own this, snowboard, but I'm not using it. But I can let a bunch of other people use the snowboard, but I don't care where it is, because I have this digital record that's it's like legally recognized by the state. So wherever this snowboard goes in the world, while I'm not using it, I don't care, because I have this digital handcuff to me, and that's never been possible before.
Yeah.
So this is like we're opening the doors to all this really cool stuff that I think we're going to see, and that's the part that I'm like most excited about.
Yeah, well, it's the thing as an entrepreneur, and I've been in lots of startups. Every time I have these conversations, I keep thinking, what should I get into here? Because there's so many opportunities. This is truly like discovering a new continent. We haven't found new land in a long time, and all of a sudden there's this entire universe that really has no limits of ownership and how it potentially can disrupt. I'm actually speaking in the month of May. I'm speaking with a bunch of CEO breakfast groups, and I used to do this all the time. And the last one I went to was in 2019. It was like August of 2019, and I talked about this concept I call the kid in the garage. And I say, look, there's a kid in a garage someplace, Mr. Corporation, that is doing something that potentially could disrupt you. He's one science experiment away from eliminating your business, be that the asphalt business or the petroleum business, or he's one line of code away from eliminating you as a bank. So what is your strategy around that? And we talked about all of these sort of things that were, we talked about AI, we talked about all these things. None of us saw that there would be a pandemic in 6 months that could really affect it. It was somebody sneezing on a bat, or a bat sneezing on somebody, and the next thing you have these issues. But I do think we have to be thinking about this. No matter what business you're in, you've got to be sitting down right now and creating a strategy and saying, where is this going? Because the 5-year plan, which is what so many corporations work off of, come on, 5 years from now, it's a totally different universe. Think back 5 years ago where we were. Everything is in fast forward right now. And I think, what's that?
I know. Like what's happening right now is it's like Web 2.0 on 2x speed.
Yes. Yeah. That's really, so tell me a little bit about your company, Ownerfy. It's Ownerfy, right?
Yeah. Ownerfy.
So what does Ownerfy do?
So Ownerfy, basically, it's sort of an evolution of the idea that I had, to begin with, the sort of intermediary that tells you like what product data, what data belongs to what product, without people having to actually input it into all their different systems. But it's to do that in NFT format, but we're building up to that. So right now we're kind of doing a lot of things, and we're involved in these NFT collection projects like Justin Pierce's project. We have one coming up with the photographer who took the most famous photos of Andy Warhol.
Oh, I saw that today. That's amazing. That looks really cool.
Yeah, Karen Bystadt's doing something called Little Andy's, but she's also taking photos of like Johnny Depp and Brad Pitt and Willem Dafoe and Sandra Bullock, and all those celebrity photos are going to be in this collection too.
Nice.
So that's really cool, and it's really fun for me right now.
Yeah.
But I still have our eyes on the prize, which is documenting all these products and physical products around the world, but not just documenting their data, but also now documenting who owns them. Right. So that's the element that's been added. That was the element that's been added to my original concept. That's the evolution. Is now you don't just have the information about the product. You have the owner, and then the previous owners, and then whoever buys it next can see the history of that object. And then it can also do all sorts of cool. These NFTs can also do all sorts of cool things, like help prevent counterfeiting, because you have, you release a certain number with that, handbag or that, shoe or whatever it is, and then a dress, and then then only someone with that NFT is going to be considered the person who has the original. So in a world where everybody knows that, okay, in order for you to have an authentic version of that dress, you have to have one of those 10,000 NFTs. If you don't, then I'm not going to believe you that you have an authentic version of that dress. And in that world where people like really understand that the NFT is actually harder to counterfeit than the dress.
Yeah, right.
Right. Then people will really take that seriously. And then people say, well, how do you know, it's the real dress? Well, in a world where everybody understands that and really goes off of that, then it's, if somebody gives you a fake dress, then now what they've got a real dress, but they've got an NFT. So it's not in their financial best interest to give you the fake dress and keep a dress and give you the real NFT and then keep a dress with no NFT. They can never sell.
Because it doesn't have any. The value is the value is the combination between the two.
Right. And if you can't tell the difference between the original and the fake one, then no one else is going to be able to tell the difference between the original and fake one either. So so that's the sort of the reality that we're trying to create. And there's also all sorts of other stuff. It's just like a television. Maybe you could just get warranty. I think
warranty information is one we talked about. That's huge.
Like you go to the NFT, you've got a link to the to the instruction manual. Like I hate paper. Just in all forms. Just like all forms. I like. So my original company that I started for when NFTs didn't exist yet, it was called Receipt Chain, and it's basically putting receipts on the blockchain, which I still think receipts are better than what these NFTs really are. They're really more like blockchain records is really what NFTs are. The word NFT, meaning not fungible, is not an awesome term because it means not something that you already don't know.
Right.
So like if they were to just call them blockchain records, that probably would alleviate a lot of confusion. So Ownerfy is basically, we're creating NFTs for all sorts of things right now, but our specialty is creating NFTs for physical products.
Got it.
And, we have some really cool way to do that with QR codes that I have some interesting IP that I've never even shared with the world yet of how to connect physical products to QR codes that I will be releasing at some point, which is really cool. But we only have 2 projects that are pending that have to do with physical products because it's so new and most people are not thinking that way yet.
Right.
So like if anybody wants to do physical product to NFTs, hit me up.
So I want to talk with you for a few moments about Evergreen Carbon Credits, one of the sponsors of this show. I started working with Evergreen when I was telling a friend of mine who's involved with that company about my efforts to try to learn more about blockchain, NFTs, crypto, all the things in this space. And he showed me Evergreen. Evergreen was a really unique solution. I've looked at carbon credits in the past. I've been in the sustainability industry for almost 15 years. I understood what they were. You were buying an offset to offset the carbon footprint that you or your company has. But I also understood the challenges with that. They're sold in very, very large blocks, and then people break those blocks up and try to sell individual credits or small clusters of credits to businesses. And that creates some room for fraud, for people to not be up and up on what that project is, if that carbon credit is real. And there's challenges with that. And you can Google it right now and find there's a big case in Europe going on about fraudulent carbon credits. But what Evergreen did, I thought, was really unique. They took this idea of NFTs and they took blocks of carbon credits and broke those things down into tens of thousands or even millions of individual carbon credits. They can actually fraction those even out to a tenth of a carbon credit if they needed to. And they were able to then create a smart contract around that carbon credit so that you can track it back to its origin. You can find out what project it was associated with, but you are also guaranteed that the carbon credits you're getting from Evergreen are the real deal. You get that certificate, you get that certification that only the blockchain can do. So that's why it made sense for them to come on as a sponsor of this show. We're talking about all this new technology, and with new technology comes higher energy usages in some senses. And Evergreen is here to help offset that. If you want to look to maybe improve your image in the marketplace, maybe you're looking to offset some of your carbon footprint, not even just for your image, but actually for the sake of the planet, head on over to evergreencarboncredits.com and check out what they do. You can buy credits for as little as $11, and you'll get the certificate and the NFT that you can put in your wallet that shows that you've actually made that contribution. And that money, particularly right now with the projects they're working on, is going to reforestation in the Amazon. I think that's something we can all really get behind, particularly when we understand that the environment, the climate we're all connected to it. It doesn't matter if we're putting off emissions here in the US or if it's happening in Mexico. It all contributes to the same global problem. So why not be part of a global solution with Evergreen carbon credits? Well, and I want to tell you another little sidebar here, because this is why I think this conversation is so important. Because when I was starting to book guests for this, I started looking through my Rolodex, and a lot of people know that I had Your Triple Bottom Line, which was a radio show for years that turned into a podcast that, in 2009, I'm doing a podcast with 5,000 subscribers. We didn't even call it a podcast then. We just called it like an online radio show. We were like, welcome to our online radio show. Like, we didn't use that terminology. But I started looking back through some of my guests, and I'm like, man, I got these CEOs of recycling companies and these different things. And I started to realize that one of the biggest topics in sustainability for a long time had been something called end-of-life product stewardship. So you're a manufacturer and you're creating something. You're creating an iPad. Whose responsibility is it when it's no longer useful as a utility? Who's responsible to make sure that it gets recycled and taken care of? And some progressive companies have gone as far. It hasn't been adopted yet because of COVID, but they go into the landfills and they take core samples and they pull them out and they separate it by brand. And they go, okay, 1% of the things in our landfill are Coca-Cola, 1%'s Pepsi, 1%'s Lay's. And then they send them a bill for all of the public waste costs associated with collection of those materials. So all of a sudden now these manufacturers are going, whoa, like I got to make sure that at the end of its life that it comes back to me or it goes to a responsible third party, because if not, I could be liable for a product that I shipped 25 years ago. And now all of a sudden it's leaking into a stream and the EPA comes and says, yeah, that MacBook got thrown in the river and it's your fault. So that transparency, that chain of ownership and knowing at the end of its life where it goes back to, I mean, you could technically put the address to mail it back to in the blockchain contract.
Right. Yeah. You would know exactly who is responsible for that. And so that's like just the idea of being like more organized and knowing like where everything is, like where all of our stuff is. Like one of the things that always was a problem in my life was that I had too much stuff and I had stuff like in, now I've like narrowed down a lot of my stuff.
Yeah.
But like, it's just having stuff in storage rooms and stuff, like having stuff stashed away in closets that you don't even remember you had. Like, you should be able to go to some phone app or to some website and see like all your stuff. Like, what's everything I own? Do I really need one of those? Do I have one of those already?
Sure.
Like, people don't even know what they have. Like, and as a civilization, we don't know what we have.
Right. We don't know what assets we have. Yeah. We haven't taken account, right? Yeah.
There's no inventory for the world. Like, there's no inventory for, our cities. Junk everywhere. Like, it's stashed away in storage rooms. And
Nick, you're talking my language. I worked in sustainability for over 10 years. And we worked with a government, with a big city, and one of the top 10 biggest cities in the US. And we went in and we created a communication platform for them so that people could share what assets they had in departments. And we found that in one department, they were getting ready to buy like 300 desks and chairs. And right across the street at the sheriff's building, they were renting a storage unit with like 450 desks and chairs in it. It's like, it's owned by the same, literally the government owns it, and they don't even know that they have it because it's in a different department. So we were able to break that down and make that connection, save the money on buying the asset, but also save all the storage that we were using up.
Yeah. It's like one of those puzzles where you move the thing down over here and the block over here. It's like right now, like, we don't even like know where all the blocks are. But like, if the world could at least get all the blocks like in the puzzle, we could start like fitting.
We could start to organize it.
There's so many. There's like, I love Craigslist, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've bought and sold so much stuff on Craigslist. Because it's like, there's so many people right now that are like buying like a bicycle or something, and they're like, I got to buy a new bike. But they could probably there's somebody selling. There's like 3 people selling a bike that's exactly what they need.
But they go to Amazon because it's convenient and it's an easy to search database, and they just select something and buy it when they wouldn't need to do that, when they could search through that database of something in their community.
And so right now, a lot of people don't sell those bikes, and they don't sell all that extra stuff because they have to make an ad, they have to take a bunch of photos and stuff. Now imagine if it's an NFT. Like, you don't need to make an ad, you just put it for sale. It's already on OpenSea, or it's already on the, like, it's already in your inventory as an NFT, like on Ownerfy, or whatever. Like, you just click the put set for sale button, and somebody's like, hey, so that removes that friction from, or somebody says, hey, I see you got a bike, and they make an offer on it. They send you a message, they make an offer on it, and you just get an offer out of the blue.
Yeah.
Like that's a world we could live in, like, and
the smart contract could technically do the negotiation for you, right? You just program it to say, this is my bottom. And they could make an inquiry, and the smart contract would go, nope, not enough. That's what I think is so cool about this, is that the possibilities really are endless. Anything that we own, we could move into the block. Is there some sort of minimum, I guess, is the question? Like, could you have an NFT on an energy drink can? I mean, is there some minimum, like, because Visa has the 30 cents, right? If it's like, you can't really sell anything for less than 50 cents because it's going to get eaten up with transactions. How does that work in this world?
Yeah. So I did the math to see like how many, like, if you were to create a smart contract in Ethereum, like, what would be the maximum number of NFTs you could make in that one smart contract? And it's basically enough to cover all of the molecules on Earth.
Okay. So as long as we're just dealing with Earth, we're okay.
So if you were doing like at least an Ethereum-based blockchain, like Polygon or AVAX or Platon or one of the Ethereum, you could make a smart contract that could cover enough NFTs to NFT everything on the planet, including like smart drinks and energy drinks and salads and stuff, and even consumables. But consumables are tough though, because they do get moved through and destroyed ultimately. So you might start using up those numbers. So that's probably, of all the things we NFT, food is probably the last thing that we NFT.
I could see that. Or you have to do it in blocks, right? Where you would have to Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but I could see that though. But I mean, that's the great thing is there's really no limit in the micro size of the transactions here. It's just because that utility is so it's automated and the rules are written once and it applies to everything. You could get down to a lot farther in the supply chain than you might think.
Yeah, well, with some of the other blockchains like Polygon, where you can scale easier with a lot less gas, you can start to NFT a lot more objects, do a lot more scalable projects. That's what like I'm using now is a lot of Polygon stuff because we want to NFT like whole lines of cars or things that 10, 20 things that are like in the millions of NFTs.
Right.
So you need something that's not Ethereum because of the gas.
Yeah.
But there's still like I'm still a big proponent of Ethereum based blockchains.
Yep.
Like Ethereum and Polygon and AVAX and Clayton, and there's a few other ones because they're so much better developed than some of the other blockchain solutions that people are using right now that don't really that don't check some of the boxes. Like a lot of people are like going nuts over Solana right now, and but the problem is Solana doesn't really have community standards built for their NFTs. So everybody's going through this company Metaplex, and Metaplex has the only smart contracts on Solana that all the Solana NFTs run through. And that's a really big problem because if you want to
decentralized,
it's not decentralized, that's a big one. If you want to do some kind of upgrading or something that they're not offering, that's going to be difficult to do. If you want to do like save a hash of the media on the blockchain, which is something that like it's like a fingerprint of the media on the blockchain. Like that's not one of the things they offer. So you can't just do that. If you want to save the name of the item on the blockchain so that people can't confuse it with another NFT, you can't really do that without building something that's on top of it that's not supported. And so Solana is sort of like built like their NFTs are built sort of ad hoc, sort of like just because there was so much pressure to build this, company stepped in and did this, and it isn't necessarily like the way that in Ethereum, because there's these community standards and because everybody has their own smart contract, there's a lot of innovation. And so basically like in Solana, they'll probably have to go in from the ground up and sort of redesign this whole system. But like it's kind of being glossed over. And then in other blockchains like ICP or like Cardano, like they're so much further behind in their development of NFTs, but people are just like, they really want to pump those blockchains. So they say, well, we've got something like an NFT. It's missing some of the most vital.
Oh, I see.
But we don't care because like we want you to buy Cardano. So like I'm like, I really think that people need to look at the important parts of like what makes an NFT and think about the quality of their NFTs. Because it's about saving recognizable data on the blockchain that you can look back years from now and say, it's on the blockchain what this thing is supposed to be, like undisputably what this thing is supposed to be. You don't need any third party to tell you what this thing is supposed to be, what it is on the blockchain. Ideally, there's some sort of like digital fingerprint of what it is, so you can prove without a shadow of a doubt that like that image matches that digital fingerprint at that time. And then you really have like your evidence or your receipt, is what I like to say, of that object or whatever. So yeah, that's another thing that like I really would like to push more for is like standards in NFTs. Like just quality standards and like how people make NFTs. But that's pretty. I would.
Well, some of that I think will come with regulation too. I'm very libertarian in my approach on things, but regulation always comes in at some point, right? And it starts to create some standardization. The hope is, and a lot of industries actually have gotten ahead of regulation by standardizing themselves and policing themselves, so that the government doesn't start looking over there and saying, "Wait a second, let's try to figure out how to do something with this." But I think that's the key: is the community coming together and policing itself. But what better way to do it than with blockchain? I think that's the cool thing, is it's baked into the entire system.
Yeah, well, OpenSea is doing a lot of that themselves with trying to cut out projects that are probably going to end up being against securities regulations.
Smart.
Like they when you try and get a project verified on OpenSea, they ask you a series of questions like, are you doing any profit sharing? Are you sharing your royalties with the community? Are you creating like a token that is providing any kind of like value, like monetary value to your users?
Yeah, because that would be could be taxable, and boy, there's all sorts of.
It's basically a security because people are buying a share of a mutual project that that everybody is sharing in the profit for. And that's,
and if they're not accredited, that can be a problem. Or if you haven't filed like your Reg CF and your Reg A forms with the SEC, so I could see why they're doing that, because crowdfunding has become a really hot topic now, doing these Reg A's and Reg CFs where you can raise money from people that aren't accredited investors, but there still is a high bar there. You have to have auditors that get involved and a lot of different things.
Yeah. And so like, I'm very careful to tell the projects that I work with, like, okay, like we can't promise people a return on their tokens. We can't promise. That's like, you're entering in that securities realm. We can't create profit sharing, and everybody's like wants profit sharing. I mean, some of these big projects are doing profit sharing, like Cool Cats and stuff. They're like, oh, we'll get, and it's like,
but at some point, how do you? And then at that point, you start to get the government asking questions and want to know the names of everybody, and
I'm very libertarian, like in how I believe people should be able to spend their money and
me too.
Philosophy. But the problem is that the government hasn't really caught up to the technology, so they're still looking at this with the lens of the old school way of looking at things. But I think there needs to be new regulation, honestly, like because like people should be like, the thing is, they're always talking about protecting the investors. Well, what if the investors are happy? Like, what if the investors don't want protection? Like, who are you protecting? Like, the people who buy into these NFT projects are very happy to buy into the NFT projects. So so the SEC always comes in, and like when they do pick a project, they come in and they find like one unhappy person.
Like always the one that they can put in front of Congress, right?
One unhappy person. They say, look, we're protecting. And then that one person's like, there needs to be regulation because I lost, $100 on my NFT. But then you have like hundreds of thousands of other people, all the people who are in the ERC20. Like, the government dropped the ball so hardcore on ERC20 tokens. And
so tell me what an ERC20 is. That's an interesting term.
So ERC20 is how you describe the token, a fungible token. This was the thing that was before NFTs.
Okay.
The fungible token, that means a token where every token is worth the same as every other token.
Okay.
So dollars are fungible. Right. You probably know all this stuff. It's now, I didn't know the term fungible until 4 or 5 years ago.
Well, the application is the question, because are we applying it the old financial economics way, or are we applying it in some new? And I think that's the purpose of the show, right? Is to explain what it means in today's terminology and with the lens of blockchain.
Right. So that's one of the reasons why NFTs have become popular, is because they are not fungible. So they're even less, they fit even less into the boxes that the government sees as the traditional boxes. Because you have one NFT that's worth $2,000 and you have one worth $1,000. So how do you? They're not really proportionate shares.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Of an endeavor. But so the ICOs that happened like in 2016, 2017, mostly 2017, were all fungible tokens, where they were all the same. So they were not NFTs, not fungible tokens. So they were basically ways for a lot of companies were raising money. Like, it's hard to say it any other way, but they were definitely raising money to do things. But the thing is, like, everybody really wanted to do these things. Like, there was such a huge motivation and drive to raise capital to invest in these new projects. And it was like lightning. It was just, everybody was fired up, and it was all happening in the United States. like the United States had cornered the market on blockchain. The blockchain technology was exploding in the United States like nobody's business. It was started here. We were the hub, the center of the blockchain universe in 2017. And then the government stepped in and made an example of a couple of really famous cases. And those cases, I think, like a couple of them were like, you know, one of them was like with Floyd Mayweather, and it was like unicorn gold.
I remember that. Yeah.
So there was some that were like you know, had to do with gambling too, but they also picked on a few other projects, and when they did that, basically, and then they didn't clear up regulation. They just basically, you know, used the current tools to slam a few of high profile projects that had enough things that they didn't like. But then they never cleared up regulations, so that they got everybody really afraid, because they didn't say that there was any clear way to do an ICO, you know, except for using really dated tools that none of these projects could afford to do. I mean, a lot of them were kids in garages. Yeah, right. You know? So you got 10,000 kids in garages that are like, got a fire, you know, up their ass. Yeah. To do this amazing work, and they're working, you know, they're super motivated, and now you just slam them all shut, and that's what happened. And then they slammed them all shut. And then everybody had to go run overseas and do like all this weird stuff where they open a company somewhere overseas, and then they do an ICO, but it's not available in the United States. And basically the only people who did that were, so they killed that. They just killed innovation for blockchain innovation. They probably like cut it down like 85% in 2017, and drove all that innovation outside of the United States. And I think that was the worst thing you could possibly do from an economic standpoint for the country. And I'm just like hoping that doesn't happen again for NFTs.
I do think that because the level of investors that are getting involved, that it'll hopefully not be that. It's because it's not just a bunch of kids in garages. You know, when you see, you know, people that, you know, have clout on Wall Street that are starting to get involved, or even some of the new funds that are trying to, you know, hold crypto in them. And I feel like it's become more mainstream. Sometimes this is what happens. You know, being the pioneer is not always the fun position. I have many friends who have created companies in the 90s, or even myself, you know, that created companies in the 2000s that we failed miserably. And now we look back and we're like, dude, we created that whole industry like 30 years ago. We just didn't know it yet.
I was going around doing stage conferences, talking on stages, talking on panels, and telling people about all this stuff in 2017 and 2018. And now I'm seeing a lot of it come to fruition, and a lot of really big projects and things. And yeah, I'm saying too, like, you know, this is, hey, you know, I helped build this. Like,
we already did this, yeah. I told you when we were together, 2006, we launched Build Proof, which was a smart contract where the money was held in this escrow account, and everybody could log in and see it, and all the receipts were there, and there were these little sliders, and as they moved the slider, the money, we built all of this stuff. You know, our CTO went off to be CTO for one of the top Silicon Valley tech companies, you know? So, I mean, we were doing this stuff. We just didn't know what it was. And when we showed it to people, they were like, what the, like, who's going to do this? What do you mean you got to log into your computer? Like, well, so if people want to find out more about you, ownerfy.com.
Yeah.
Ownerfy.com. Ownerfy.com. And it sounds like you got a couple projects that are coming up, including this Andy one. I'm going to go check that out. When does that launch? Do you have a date for launch on that yet?
Yeah. It's Earth Day, April 22nd.
Oh yeah. 40. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. That's that one. And if anybody wants, like, we are releasing an NFT API now. Okay, cool. So that is ready for anybody who wants to beta test. Basically, you can make an NFT. You can make smart contracts. You can make NFTs. You can transfer NFTs all through our API. Like if you have a development, you know, if you have an app, and that all happens through credit cards. So you don't have to do any blockchain transactions.
That's nice. So that was the intimidating part for me. The first time I logged in and they were like, connect your wallet. I'm like, my Apple wallet? Like, where do I put my credit card? You know? Yeah, exactly. Ethereum. I'm like, well, I have some of that, but it's in my Coinbase account. That's not a wallet, is it? And then I had to do research and watch videos and learn the whole thing. And by that point, it was sold out. So I missed it.
we do everything with credit card. If you want to go to our website and make an NFT collection, you can just go on there and use a credit card. Nice. And start making NFTs and get into it. But things are going great. Awesome. Thanks a lot for bringing me on.
Yeah, Nick, this was really great. I can't believe we talked for over an hour, but it goes to show there's so much to talk about in this marketplace. And I'd love to have you on again too. Let's keep in touch and find more topics. You've been around, so that's helpful because you sort of know the history of all this too, which I think is really important. People need to have that history recorded so we know where this all came from and where it's going. But,
thanks a lot. This is really cool. And,
it was. I'm looking forward to doing it again.
I would love to come on again.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.